Hey, thanks for stopping by the channel. A new narrative that normally presents historical facts that contradict the current political and social narrative of victimization. These facts can leave you feeling empowered and motivated to take advantage of all the advantages our society has to offer. If you get something new out of this, click the like and subscribe button and to support the channel. Now, I said normally we present historical facts. But today I'm going to present my review of the Trayvon Martin Hoax Documentary. This is something I didn't plan on doing, but it's definitely right up my alley, so to speak. And before the review, I want to start with how I got to the review. How I got to the documentary. So I was watching the Glenn Show, and it's a podcast presented by Mr. Glenn Laurie of Brown University, and he had a guest. I guess he's a recurring guest, John McWhorter, who's a professor at Columbia University, and these are two African American gentlemen. And the title of their podcast was something like the Trayvon Martin hoax, and I was instantly disappointed. Because, I've been watching the Glenn Show for a little while, and although he's a little more left-leaning than I am, I respected his opinion and his accomplishments as a professional, And I instantly think, why would you even touch this thing? There's no way you can win with this. But they, at the beginning of the podcast, acknowledged their hesitancy in touching this subject matter. And with that, I said, okay, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. So I listened to what they had to say. Now, at the end of their two podcasts, I was convinced enough to go a little further. And so what I did was I looked online and got the complaint that Zimmerman's attorney filed in the court in Florida. And after reading that, I was convinced I needed to watch this documentary because what's in that complaint is just, I don't want to say mind-blowing, it sounds so cliche, but I was just blown away. How did they get away with this? If what's in this complaint is true, how in the world did they get away with this? So that's how I got to the documentary. So I'll start off by saying Mr. Joel Gilbert, I think he would want you, I'm speaking on his behalf, I haven't met the guy in person. I think he would want you to pay attention to the message and not necessarily the messenger, although he's throughout the DVD, right? There's so many facts in the DVD that I ended up watching it twice just due to its density. But it is an enjoyable, watchable DVD. It's not like, if you're watching the Civil War, a historical documentary on the Civil War and you have no interest in the Civil War, it's a pain to get through. No, this is, it's a modern day event. The information is presented in, I guess you could say, a journey format. So what he does is he takes you on a journey that first kind of contradicts the first narrative or the main narrative of this situation, which is this white supremacist guy stalked and basically confronted and then eventually killed this innocent black teenage boy visiting his father's girlfriend. So he contradicts that with facts. He gives you the back and okay, so the two main components of that narrative is a white racist man and an innocent young black boy. So the white racist man narrative was contradicted by George Zimmerman's life prior to that incident. What I didn't know was that he mentored black youth, and is presented in the documentary. video evidence of that. He also was a huge Barack Obama supporter. He's not white. He's half Hispanic. No, I believe he's all Hispanic. I know Spanish is his first language. So he's not this white supremacist who just left a KKK rally, right? The other portion of that narrative, or other half of that narrative, is this innocent black guy was stalked. Well, that Trayvon Martin was, at the time that Zimmerman saw him, was standing in the rain, not trying to get out of the rain, wearing a hoodie, in a neighborhood where Zimmerman lived, which had just been, over the recent months or whatever, a certain amount of time, been plagued with burglaries. And the burglarers were young black men. So Trayvon Martin standing in the rain in between buildings, not trying to get out of the rain, would pique anybody's suspicion. So how that concluded was the death of Trayvon Martin. What the police concluded after eyewitness testimony, the police phone call, all this stuff you get to see on the documentary, is that Zimmerman's claim of self-defense was valid, and so they did not arrest him. Now, that's where it should have ended, but it didn't. And the reason why it didn't end was because a mother lost her son, and you just don't want to believe that. You want someone to pay for that. I believe everybody would understand that. And I'm going to say that I believe the bad actor in there was the attorney, Mr. Crump, who pushed. This is my assumption. He got in and pushed the family to seek some form of something for the death of Trayvon Martin. And after he was acquitted, after the justice system deemed that Zimmerman did nothing wrong, they came up with this witness that contradicted all of the evidence that was presented to exonerate Mr. Zimmerman. Now, that's the crux of this documentary, who this witness was. Now, we were led to believe that the witness that took the stand, the heavyset, his Haitian girl, I believe her last name is Jontil, was the girl on the phone with Trayvon Martin, the girlfriend on the phone with Trayvon Martin. What Joel Gilbert does in his documentary is present a boatload of evidence, factual evidence from public records, that this could not be the girl who was on the phone. And he takes us on a journey to discover the girl who was actually on the phone and the switch, I guess you could say. And he presents evidence that could only lead to the conclusion. Now, I don't know how you can come up with another conclusion after all this evidence, that Trayvon Martin's mother knew that this was not Trayvon Martin's girlfriend. The prosecution knew this. Mr. Crump definitely knew this. And even though they knew that this girl was not the actual witness, they put her on the stand anyway. And what's the motivation for doing that? It appears that the girl who was on the phone refused to take the stand and say what they wanted her to say. Okay, so that's basically the documentary. He does a very good job of presenting this information. He actually finds the girl who's on the phone. You see the contrast between her and the girl who took the stand, not just in physical appearance, but in her personality, because he presents all of the phone records, text messages, and all of this stuff. And it's just night and day. Her name is Diamond Eugene. The real girlfriend's name is Diamond Eugene. And the girl who took the stand, they're just night and day people. I'll leave it to you to go watch the documentary to see how different they are and how inexplicable it is that they got these two confused. I don't think that's in any way possible. So with that, he concludes with something I totally agree with, and that's my opinion. And it's been something on my mind for a long time. I've written on this subject, and my previous podcast, whatever you want to call it, was on this subject matter. And that is, we'll have an organic event take place and it's negative and it's unfortunate, but somehow someone takes a political advantage of that situation to an identifiable community's detriment. And in this case, it was unfortunate that Trayvon Martin, I want to say a typical kid. I can see myself in Trayvon Martin in his actions. We've all done dumb things as kids. We've all gone through, trials and tribulations as teenagers, especially if you have, a family situation that's not too stable. It doesn't mean you deserve to die. It just means that instability in your life leads to some, questionable choices, and often those choices and decisions can lead to dire consequences. So out of Trayvon Martin's tragedy, someone took a political advantage of that to specifically Zimmerman's detriment, and in general, the American community at large, but a little more narrower, the African American community detriment. So with that said, I'm going to say that I highly recommend the video. It is, due to the politicalization of the subject matter, I think Joel Gilbert did a very good job of making this as politically neutral as you could with this type of information in this situation. But again, I'm going to highly recommend that you watch it. And if you have any doubts or concerns, or if you're thinking like, oh, this is some far right propaganda or something like that, well, read the complaint. I'll leave a link to the complaint below, and you can start there and just know that, hey, there's consequences for frivolous lawsuits, right? There's consequences for that. And I think that this is legitimate, and I am very eager to see the outcome of this case in court. And I hope that you take the time to watch the DVD, read the book, read the court case, and judge for yourself what's going on in your community, your life, and in our country. Thanks.